Right now we are just leaving Nevada and entering the remote northeast corner of California. Up here, Highway 395 runs through empty plains, small towns, and wide stretches of land where it feels like time has stood still. We'll be following Highway 395 all the way to the Oregon border, stopping to explore along the way what's left behind in this quiet part of the state. We are not only entering California, but also Sierra County, though only temporarily. In 3 miles, we'll be in Lassen County. The southern section of Highway 395 in California, through the eastern Sierra, isn't exactly the most populated part of the state, but by comparison to this stretch through northern California, that stretch will feel crowded. We will be traveling through 2 of the 3 least populated counties in California, and 3 of the top 10. Highway 395 runs about 557 miles through California, with a short detour into Nevada, splitting it in 2. This northern segment is roughly 202 miles long, taking us from the edge of the Sierra Nevada to the far northeast corner of the state. We'll start by skirting the eastern slopes of the Sierra, before crossing into the wide open landscapes of the Modoc Plateau. Most Highway 395 guidebooks stop in Reno, skipping Northern California entirely. And that's why we are here, to see what's hiding out on this stretch of road. We've just reached Doyle, California. This town was named for Oscar Doyle, who settled here in the 1870s and donated the land for the town. It was originally a stage stop called Willow Ranch, and it became Doyle when the Western Pacific Railroad arrived in the early 1900s. The post office opened here in 1909, making it an official dot on the map. As of the 2020 census, the population here is 536. We have an old abandoned motel here in Doyle. This is the Midway Motel, and it opened in 1955. And I'm not sure when it closed, but it looks like it's been closed for some time. What is this place the Midway for? My guess is it's midway between Reno and Susanville, but I'm not exactly sure on that. There's another abandoned business over here. Highway 395 used to go right through the center of town, but at some point they routed it around the town. So like a lot of small towns, the highway disappearing or being moved pretty much killed the town's economy. But this is Doyle. Prior to becoming Highway 395 in 1935, the road we're traveling on now was Legislative Route 29, with this section being created in 1919. It looks like we might be running into a bit of rain as we start approaching Honey Lake, which is one of the 2 lakes we'll pass by as we head to the Oregon state line. We are on the edge of Honey Lake and are making a quick stop in Milford. This settlement began in 1856, making it one of the oldest settlements around Honey Lake. In 1861, a flour mill opened here, and thus the name Milford. This is the old Milford Country Store. It first opened in 1894, and it looks like it's been closed for a while. You know the gas pumps are old when the prices can't even go above 99 cents a gallon. When is the last time gas prices were that low? It looks like the inside is in pretty good condition. This store was a one-stop shop in its time, even selling things like 8-track tapes. We are passing by Honey Lake now. This lake is named for the honeydew produced by the aphids in the area. This lake has been drying out and filling back in for thousands of years. During the last ice age, this was the bottom of an enormous inland sea. Now, some years there's a lot of water, some years it's just dust. Honey Lake was also used as a bombing test range before World War II, and for ordnance demolition and testing through the war and into the mid-1950s. And occasionally, some of that ordnance turns back up. And the Sierra Army Depot is even still to this day located on the east side of the lake. We've taken a slight detour of about 3.5 miles off Highway 395 to visit Susanville, which is by far the biggest city we'll pass by on this stretch of highway. We are also at where Susanville began. We are at Roop's Fort, which was built beginning in 1853 and was the first building built by white settlers in what is now Lawson County. It was built by Isaac Roop to serve as a trading post for people traveling westbound into California. In fact, here's a California trail marker. This was on the Nobles Trail, but more on that later. Susanville was originally founded as Roopville, but it was later changed to honor Roop's daughter, Susan. For travelers coming west, this would be the first post they'd reach west of Fort Hall in Idaho. This building was also the capital of what was called the Nautaqua Territory. The people who lived here figured they were outside the jurisdiction of both California and Utah. Nevada hadn't been separated from Utah yet, and just started their own territory. This was built on a hill, so they had a good vantage point, but now it's a park down below us. When a survey was done of California's boundaries, it was determined that this area was in California's Plumas County, and some locals weren't pleased. At the time, this area was really cut off from the rest of the state because of the Sierra Nevada mountains. They also didn't like the fact that they now had to pay taxes. This led to what was known as the Sagebrush War, a 2-day skirmish fought in Susanville in February 1863 between the residents and the Plumas County Sheriff and tax officials. This building played a leading role in the skirmish as about 100 men were garrisoned here, but eventually a compromise was reached, and Lassen County was created in 1864 with Susanville as the county seat. And taking a look at the buildings, I'm not sure how much of them are actually original at this point. These trees were definitely already around when this fort was built, though. Like I said, I'm not sure how much of the building is still original. This chimney and fireplace, for example, definitely doesn't look like it dates back to the mid-1800s. And it looks like concrete has been used here to fill in the gaps. Back in the 1800s, this would have been mud. But even if it's not completely original, it's cool to see that it's still here. Up these stairs is the old Elks Hall, dating back to 1885. The land was originally owned by Isaac Roop, and eventually a dentist bought it and built his dream home here. Then in the 1920s, the Elks Club bought it and made it their lodge. Though it looks like the building is actually for sale now. Hopefully it'll be preserved. I had to look it up. The asking price on this is just under $1 million. So if you know anyone looking for a 140-year-old Elks Lodge, here you go. From the property, you do get a great view of downtown Susanville. Here's the old Sierra Theater. This was built in 1935, and it's great to see that they're still showing movies here. It looks like at one point they would host video dance parties here, whatever those are. It's always amazing when buildings stand the test of time, because as we can see from across the street here, not everyone does. Unfortunately, this was the historic St. Francis Hotel, built in 1913. We are now at the Lassen County Courthouse, built in 1917, and also the site of the old jail. Isaac Roop donated the land for this courthouse in 1864. Before this current courthouse was built, this was also the site of a few hangings, including a couple in 1886, where Vicente Olivas, known as Mexican Ben, and the very unfortunately named Holden Dick were lynched. I have to choose my words carefully here because I wanted to make sure I didn't say that he was hung. Let's take a closer look at the old jail. This was built in 1911. Kind of getting back to the hangings for a minute. While the sheriff was at a dance, a mob got together, broke into the jail, and it wasn't this jail, it was a previous jail, and took care of the two prisoners. It was a pretty gruesome sight. Both prisoners were tortured. They hung Dick by his hair while he was alive and shot him in the face before finally hanging him. The bodies were left hanging for a day. It was called at the time the most brutal lynching ever known in California. I mean, this guy was a bad dude who was suspected of a number of murders. So it goes without saying, the citizens of Susanville did not care for Holden Dick. I think we better head on to the next place before we get in trouble here. I don't want this to turn into Sidetrack Adventures After Dark. And I know, it's a little immature. There's nothing funny about Holden Dick. In the late 1800s, Susanville hoped for a railroad connection, but was bypassed by the Nevada, California, and Oregon Railway, and more on them when we get further north. So they tried to build their own railroad, but that fell through as well. Then in 1908, a Southern Pacific subsidiary, the Fernley and Lawson Railway, was incorporated with the aim of connecting Fernley, Nevada to Westwood, California, passing right through Susanville. The railroad reached Susanville by April 1913. As a temporary fix, a boxcar served as the first depot, and by September that year, a combination passenger freight station was established. Rising demand led to the construction of this dedicated depot building in 1927. Thanks largely to the Great Depression, the depot only had a brief period of usage though. Passenger service here only lasted from 1913 to 1933. Even the freight service ended in 1956. A flood damaged the track, and Southern Pacific didn't even feel it was worth it to repair it. Until the 1970s, the railroad used the depot for storage. Then in 1987, an agreement was made between Southern Pacific and the Susanville Fire Department to burn the depot down as a firefighting practice session. That obviously didn't happen. The depot was saved, and restoration began in the 1990s. Most of the old rail line has been removed, and is now the Biz Johnson National Recreation Trail, which is in the Rail Trails Hall of Fame. We've traveled a little bit outside of Susanville now. So we are currently in Lassen County, and nearby is Lassen Peak, Lassen National Forest, and Lassen Volcanic National Park. We've come to the spot where the guy that all that stuff is named for is buried. Peter Lassen was a Danish immigrant who arrived in California in 1840. Lassen became well known for establishing the Lassen Cutoff of the California Trail in the late 1840s. While it was advertised as a shortcut to the goldfields, the route was actually longer and more difficult than the other trails, leading to resentment among many immigrants. He also had a ranch near here, which became a stop for pioneers headed west. Now, there is some mystery surrounding his death. Peter Lassen was murdered on April 26, 1859, in the Black Rock Desert region of what is now northwestern Nevada. He was traveling with two companions, Edward Clapper and Americus Wyatt, reportedly on a prospecting expedition. While camped in a remote area, Lassen and Clapper were shot and killed, while Wyatt survived and escaped. The killer, or killers, have never been conclusively identified. And this obelisk here is the newer Lassen monument. So the monument here states that he was killed by Indians. This is what Wyatt claimed. However, there was no evidence of a typical raid, and many local tribes denied involvement. Critics also noted that there were no stolen supplies or scalping, which was often common in such attacks at the time. Lassen had land disputes and made enemies, especially from his misleading promotion of the Lassen Cutoff. And here's the original monument. I believe this is also where he's actually buried. It's been suggested that disgruntled pioneers or rivals may have exacted revenge. But if that's the case, why would Wyatt say otherwise? There's also a grave here for Clapper, the guy who was killed with Lassen. And one for Joseph Lynch, who was Lassen's friend. So there are the theories of a Native American attack or somebody exacting revenge. And of course, there is Americus Wyatt, the lone survivor. Some believe he may have killed Lassen and Clapper for gold or personal reasons, while others suggest he may have had help from others with a financial or political motive. We'll probably never know what really happened, but his unsolved murder remains one of the enduring frontier mysteries of early California history. And we got to give credit where credit is due. It looks like the new monument was an Eagle Scout project by Hayden Chiddock in 2018. We are back on Highway 395 now, and there hasn't been exactly a lot of traffic on the road so far, but from what I understand, the further we get from Susanville, we should start seeing less and less cars on the road. The northeastern part of the state gets pretty remote. This is Standish. The town dates to 1897 and is named for someone with no connection to the area whatsoever, Miles Standish, who came to America on the Mayflower. This large building right on the highway is Standish Hall and was built in 1907. This town was laid out and created by a company called Associated Colonies of New York in order to create a utopian community. Nowadays, the population here is about 85. The first floor of this building was once a store, and the second floor served as a meeting hall for a number of different groups over the years. This building definitely has seen better days, but it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2005. Between 1841 and 1869, more than 200,000 immigrants traversed the California Trail in one of the largest mass migrations in human history. When the trail was established around 1840, it was primarily used by fur trappers and a few immigrants. With the discovery of gold in California in 1848, though, the trail became flooded with fortune seekers. It continued to be a major route for settlers until the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, which made overland wagon travel largely obsolete. Once travelers reached the Humboldt River in Nevada, the trail kind of branched into different routes they could take into California to cross the Sierra Nevada. This section was the Nobles Immigrant Trail and was created in 1851 by William H. Nobles, a frontiersman and guide who promoted it as a better alternative to the more treacherous routes like the Lassen Cutoff. By the mid-1850s, it was one of the most traveled routes into Northern California. I can't imagine this area looks much different now than it did for those wagon trains in the 1850s. Earlier, we were on a section of the highway that was improved in 1919, but until the 1930s, there wasn't much of a road through this area up to Alturas at all. Only a railroad line that the highway now basically follows alongside. This was the route of the Nevada-California-Oregon Railway. When it was created, the plan was for the railroad to run from Reno, Nevada to the Columbia River in Oregon, but it never made it that far. Because of the railroad's bad reputation, people joke that the NCO stood for narrow, crooked, and ornery. The railroad was formed in 1880, and it took them until 1912 to reach Lakeview, Oregon, about 250 miles short of where they planned on having their northern terminus. And it never made it further than that. In the 1920s, the railroad was bought out by Southern Pacific, and they abandoned most of the line in the 1980s. We just made a quick stop at this rest area, and check this out. This rest area has one of those old-style water fountains that were built for rest areas in the 1930s up until the maybe 1950s. So I imagine that's when this dates to. It's pretty rare to see one that's actually working. We are also now traveling across what is known as the Modoc Plateau, a volcanic table that is thought to have formed about 25 million years ago. We are about to drive through the town of Ravendale. Like pretty much every other town on this stretch of highway, this was a station on the Nevada, California, Oregon Railroad. This was never really a big town. In 1939, the elementary school here dropped to 0 students, and the town figured they didn't have to pay the school teacher's salary that year since there were no students. But the case went to the state attorney general, who ruled for the teacher. So it sounds like the teacher had a pretty easy job that year. Here is some of the old railroad bed as it comes into a place called Termo. Termo is just a ghost town now, but it was the original 1900 terminus of the Nevada, California, Oregon Railway, before the line was extended north. A post office opened here in 1908, closed in 1914, and then reopened in 1915, and believe it or not, stayed open all the way until 1989. I'm not sure what this building once was, but whatever it was, it's gone now. The post office here ended up closing for safety reasons too. They thought the building might collapse on the postman. But I believe the post office would have been in the store up ahead, which does not look like it's collapsed. There are actually quite a few buildings here for a town whose heyday was really short-lived. There was some homesteading in the area in the early 1900s, and that's why the post office remained open while the railroad's terminus moved further north. This is the old Termo store. I'm not sure when this closed, but it looks like it's been closed for quite some time now. It looks like there's a few more buildings over here. It looks like Termo has a few residents. There are quite a few quail walking around that don't seem to like me walking around here. When you think about it, the only reason a town was ever here was because the railroad got this far and ran out of money for a while. So for it to last as long as it did is kind of amazing. This is likely California, but I just checked the map. It's definitely California. Likely was initially known as South Fork, named after the South Fork of the Pitt River, but the post office insisted at the time that towns could only have one-word names. Residents were unable to agree what to name the town until a local rancher observed that they would most likely never agree upon a name, at which point someone nominated the name Likely, and the name was voted in. The Likely post office opened in 1886. We are now in the town of Alturas, and this is pretty much where Alturas began. A bridge was built here over the Pitt River, And the town was even originally called Doris Bridge. In 1874, the town was renamed Dorisville, then Alturas in 1876. And here is the North Fork of the Pitt River. The Pitt River isn't very wide in this area, but then again, it wasn't very wide when that first bridge was built that started the settlement either. Let's take a look around town. It looks like this building over here may have once been a Sears, or at least a merchant that was authorized to sell from the Sears catalog. This is the Alturas Depot, which was built for the Nevada, California, Oregon Railway in 1908. It used to be in another part of town, but in 1915, the railroad disassembled it and moved it here brick by brick. Passenger service to Alturas was discontinued in 1938, and this has been the home of the Alturas Garden Club since 1962. The depot was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1985. With over 2,700 people, this is the biggest town on Highway 395 between Susanville and Central Oregon, but I'm pretty sure we've seen more deer than people walking around. Here's the Modoc County Courthouse, built in 1914. Alturas is the Modoc County seat. In 1917, the Nevada, California, Oregon Railway spent $40,000 to build this building that looks something like a mission to be their new headquarters, moving here from Reno. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1974, and it's been an Elks Lodge since that time as well. Just ran into some more locals. This apparently once was the big store. Here's the Niles Theater, built in 1937. And Hollywood should do whatever it can to make sure that these small town theaters continue to show movies, and I'm glad this one is. There are quite a few old and historic buildings here in downtown Alturas. Because progress moves a little slower in these small towns, it's always great to see so many historic buildings still standing. I bet if we came here 70 or 80 years ago, this street would have been packed with people shopping and doing business. But nowadays, a lot of the storefronts are empty, like this one here. As the world has modernized, small towns have taken quite the hit. But that's the great thing about taking an old highway instead of the interstate. You get to see places like this. Places that have a real history to them. That kind of brings us to our next and final stop for the night, the place where we'll be actually spending the night, which is the Hotel Niles, which is supposedly an extremely haunted hotel, but we'll see about that. This was built in 1908, 1909 as the Curtis Hotel, and then it was purchased and expanded by J.L. Niles in 1912, becoming the Hotel Niles. And we've actually already checked in, so let's go in and take a look around. This is the downstairs ballroom and old saloon. For generations, this place served as the social hub for cattlemen, railroad workers, and travelers. And things would get pretty wild here. Above the bar here, there are a number of bullet holes in the ceiling, as people in the old days would have shot their guns in the air in celebration. Which is really crazy because there are hotel rooms right above us. Here's an old style cash register. And here's another saloon at the hotel. They claim that this piano was used in the movie Singing in the Rain. We are on the second floor now, and this place definitely feels like a hotel that dates back to the early 1900s. This area over here looks like it's right above the saloon downstairs where the bullet holes were in the ceiling. So imagine sitting around up here just relaxing and having some bullets coming up through the floor. There are quite a few old pictures on the wall. I don't know if these are of anyone related to the town or hotel in any way, or if they're just put here for ambiance. I try not to get into the haunted stuff that much, but the hotel does remind you of the movie The Shining. We might as well do a room tour while we're at it. Here's our room, number 4, the wedding suite. And we have an actual key, not one of those key cards you find in modern hotels. Since we're staying in a supposedly haunted hotel, a while back we bought a cheap ghost detector on Amazon, so we figured we'd bring it back out and see if we can detect any ghosts. And maybe we'll be sleeping in the car tonight. So let's take a look around with this ghost detector. The hotel is said to be haunted by the spirit of a former prostitute, rumored to have been murdered here. It's said she roams the upper floors and even hops into bed with male visitors. Let's just hope she doesn't hog the covers like my wife does. We better test our own luggage. Okay, it doesn't look like our luggage is haunted. And like I said, I don't know who any of these pictures are of. One of these people could be the ghost. Let's hope the ice bucket and glasses aren't haunted. There are a lot of other ghost stories about this place too, with doors opening and strange footsteps, etc. I personally don't believe in any of this stuff, but who knows? Maybe something will happen tonight to change my mind. Aside from when it went off earlier, this thing's not really doing much. If you can't trust a cheap ghost detector from Amazon, what can you trust? If there's anything in this room that's haunted, it's going to be this lamp. And no, the lamp isn't haunted. Whatever ghost was here got scared and left. So we figured out what set this thing off earlier, and unfortunately it's not a ghost. When you bring it towards any electronics, it goes off. So what set it off earlier is my wife walked by with her iPhone. Then again, maybe her phone is haunted. I didn't notice this before, but this is an old library card catalog system in here. Maybe the scariest thing here is the Dewey Decimal System. But we're going to head to bed and maybe see a ghost. Well, we made it through the night, And unfortunately, no ghost showed up, prostitute or otherwise. For some reason, we just never run into snakes or ghosts. But anyways, it's time for us to hit the road and continue on our way north. We've taken a slight detour off Highway 395 to visit Cedarville. I came through this area last year when traveling to the northeast corner of California, and have been wanting to get back and look around a little more. This area was originally known as Deep Creek, and as early as 1864 was a stopping place for wagons headed west. In 1867, William Kressler and John Bonner opened this trading post here. Let's take a quick look inside. Bonner also built the first road over Cedar Pass, which connected Surprise Valley to Alturas and the rest of Modoc County. The first post office opened here in 1869, and the town is named after Cedarville, Ohio. There's a small little creek here. Somehow I don't think this is the Deep Creek this place was originally named after. Cedarville has a pretty cool main street where we could find a few historic buildings. This library building was built in 1938 and used to be a Bank of America. Here's one of those little free libraries, and this one's pretty cool because it is a replica of the house it sits in front of, which is the Kressler House, dating back to 1880. Here's the Kressler and Bonner building. They're the same guys who built that log trading post back in the 1860s. Well, in 1884, their store was moved here. Here's the Cedarville Garage, opened in 1912. When this opened, a lot of their work was probably still wagons. This brick building is the Cedarville Grocery. It was built in 1906 and was originally a bank. In 1932, the bank failed, then it became a grocery store, and it's been one ever since. Check out this old Coca-Cola ad on the side of the grocery. There's a hardware store across the street. Cedarville is definitely worth taking a detour to check out. It only took us about 15-20 minutes from Highway 395 to get here, and it's one of the cooler towns along the road. There are so many great historic buildings here, you really feel like you're stepping back in time. Here's another great old Coca-Cola ad. Coke used these ads with what is called the Sprite Boy from 1942 to 1953. This one is in such good condition though, I don't know if this is original to that time period or if this is a later recreation. It's hard to tell for sure, but it definitely looks like it's been here for a while. This building is the Museum and Visitor Center, but unfortunately we have a habit of getting to places on days when the museums are closed. For some reason there's a coffin out in front though. Well, I guess it's because We're at Old West Coffins. It looks like there are some old buildings off Main Street as well. But right over here in front of this little park area, we still have a wooden sidewalk. Nothing makes you feel like you're back in the Old West more than walking on a wooden sidewalk. But it's time for us to get back on the highway and start heading towards the Oregon state line. We are just off Highway 395. That's it up ahead of us. But there are a lot of chimney rocks across the United States, mostly because the rocks look like some sort of chimney. This one here actually was a chimney. A man named Thomas Denson came to California in 1852 at age 12 and settled in this area. In 1870, he began building a cabin next to this rock and carved the cabin's chimney into it. And it looks like the native daughters of the Golden West put this plaque here in 1932. I don't know how long the cabin lasted for, but the railroad came through in the early 1900s, so it was gone by at least then. In older pictures from the 1920s, the fireplace is still complete, so this has had some damage over the years. A lot of people have carved into the rock too, some of it dating back to the 1800s. Here's a marker for the Lassen Trail with a diary entry from 1849 describing conical rocks. And here are those same conical rocks. We are almost at the Oregon state line, and we are at Davis Creek. This is the Davis Creek Church, established in 1886. And right over here there is a historic marker. Davis Creek was on the Applegate Trail. The Applegate Trail was kind of an offshoot of the Oregon Trail. And this one has a diary entry from 1852. About 34 years too early to check out this church. There's actually a second Applegate Trail marker here. This one has a diary entry from 1849. There's a nice little shaded picnic area here. But this church has been around long enough where it needed a place to tie off your horse. Back in the early 1900s, this town was on the southern end of Goose Lake, and there was a ferry between here and Lakeview, Oregon on the northern end. The lake has shrunk a lot since then, though, and now neither town is on the lake. The Davis Creek Mercantile is also worth a stop here. This place has been around since the early 1900s and is actually still open. As we've moved further north towards Oregon, there have been less and less cars on the road, and we're hardly seeing anyone now. We are starting to pass by Goose Lake, which straddles the California-Oregon border. In wet years, this lake stretches nearly 30 miles long and up to 7 miles wide, making it one of the larger lakes in the western United States. But it's shallow, often just a few feet deep. And during drought years, it can all but vanish, leaving behind a vast, cracked salt flat. Luckily for us right now, it looks like there's at least a decent amount of water. We've now reached New Pine Creek, a town that is in both California and Oregon. But we're not going to quite cross into Oregon yet. We're going to make a turn here on State Line Road. The right side of the road here is in Oregon, while the left side is still California. We're heading right towards Goose Lake right now, and we'll see if we can get one more good look at it. And in extremely wet years, this would be the bottom of Goose Lake. But from the ground here, you can't even see water. But this is also where Oregon and California meet. Unlike most lakes in the state, there aren't any crowds here. In fact, I don't think there are any other people for miles. But what there is space, silence, and a reminder of just how big and wild this corner of California still is. So that's our look at Highway 395 through the northeast corner of California. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.